All right, hey guys, back on for our Facebook Live this week. For people hopping on, feel free to ask any questions at any point in time. Last week I talked a little bit through changes and how change just can cause stress and how it can be really, really difficult to handle sometimes. But then in talking a little bit more through it, transition and change is not the only thing that causes stress, right? Not the only adversity that we face every day. And actually, this week at SEC Media Days, a really popular topic that several coaches and players have spoken on is not just the idea of adversity, but then also mental health, right? How the stress and pressure that student athletes are facing every day can impact their performance, can impact their overall well-being, right? So that's just a little bit of what I wanted to dive into today, and we'll post this up on YouTube afterward. Feel free to jump on and ask any questions that you have. The biggest challenge is that there are a lot of internal battles that we face as human beings, right? A lot of doubt and insecurities that come into play every single day, right? But sometimes those internal battles can be influenced by external pressures that we face, right? And there's actually a story that I read earlier in the Players Tribune by Derrick Morgan. And it's called My New Purpose. I would encourage everyone to check it out. But basically, he just told his story. He's a player for the Tennessee Titans. He got into playing football just because his mom wanted to keep him out of trouble. Didn't really have a love for the game initially, but he developed it over time. And he really saw that as something that made him feel significant. And I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I know for me, the things that I do every day, they give me a purpose. They make me feel significant. They make me feel like I'm playing a role in this great big world, right? And a lot of times we do that through athletics, through the sport that we may play. But football made him feel important. And he ended up playing in college, and then started playing professionally. And during his rookie season, pretty early on, he tore his ACL. And that really, he described how much that really rocked his world. You know, he questioned if he'd ever be the same player. He questioned his future, right? He felt that his identity, his purpose was tied to football. And so who was he going to be without football? Was he ever going to get that back? And in a sense, it was the first time that he truly felt insignificant. And he also felt the pressure of just feeling like he was letting people down. So he was forced to figure out who he was outside the game, honestly, of football. And so I bring that up to say there are certain, yes, it's an example of someone who's gone through an injury, right? And has certain pressures and feelings that are associated with what it's like to be an injured athlete and to have to go through that recovery process. But we face a lot of those same internal battles every single day in everything that we do. And when working with student athletes, there are a handful of really just pressures or stressors that I really see honestly show through in a lot of the athletes that I work with. And I just want to talk about three today. And honestly, I do think that throughout that article, Derrick pointed out a couple times when he felt, very similar. The first one is just the idea that there's uncertainty of our future, right? So what will my future hold? Who am I going to be tomorrow? Where am I going to be? Now, maybe you're dealing with that stress when it comes to trying to figure out where you're going to play in college, if you'll even play in college. Are there coaches who want to recruit you, right? Is that even a possibility? Maybe you're going through that and thinking, can I play professionally? What's it going to be like when I potentially have to stop playing? Am I prepared for that? What is my future going to hold, and am I going to be successful in that? And that can cause a lot of stress. For Derrick, in that specific article, He questioned if he'd be the same player when he got back. He knew that no matter what, he was going to fight to get back. And a lot of times when dealing with athletes who are going through injury, they want to fight back. A lot of times in dealing with any athlete, any person, when you face a challenge, you want to just bulldoze right through it and fight through it, right? But there's still that question that sits back in your head of, what's it going to look like next week? What's it going to look like a couple of months from now? And that can cause a sense of frustration, a sense of concern. And I've had a lot of people say that it keeps them up at night, and impacts their sleep. So that uncertainty of what the future is going to hold. The second one is just this idea that we live in a culture of comparison. In a world where it is so easy to see everyone's best life on social media, it's hard to then take that and rationalize what I've got going on for me. And when you lose something, whether it's because of injury, whether it's because you see your best friend going to being recruited by the school that you really wanted to play at, whether it's just the idea that someone else has a better life, a better future than what I can see that I'm holding right now, we look at other people and we ask sometimes, am I good enough? Am I doing enough? And sometimes what that can cause is more pressure to not just do more, but be like everyone else. And it can also cause us to feel like we're letting people down. I've talked with players before where they feel like they're letting their coaches down. They feel like they're letting their parents down because they have an expectation for themselves and they're not meeting up to that expectation. And when they're not meeting up to that expectation, their world crumbles apart. For Derrick, in the article in the Players Tribune, he said he felt like he was letting other people down. He said he felt as if, in a sense, because he couldn't play, because he couldn't do what he wanted to, there was a concern of letting people down, whether that's family, coaches, friends, teammates, whoever that may be. And then the third stressor and pressure that I really see that's common with a lot of the athletes that I work with is just this idea that we have an unpredictable role, and it's constantly changing. So especially, specifically for Derrick in that Players Tribune article, he was talking about, when now he felt like his identity, his meaning, and his purpose that was so tied to football. Now, who was he? And a lot of times when we lose, for those of you transitioning out of athletics, you feel like you lost a part of you. For those of you who are transitioning maybe into a different team, or making a change, or even, quite frankly, you could be on the same team. You expected your role to be bigger, and now all of a sudden you're maybe not getting the playing time that you expected, that you thought you might get, or you're not getting the same type of attention that you were really expecting when you first came in. Our roles are constantly changing, and with that change brings on a sense of concern, a sense of worry. When we have an expectation that this is how it should be, and then all of a sudden things don't go as expected. He was expecting, quite frankly, to be playing, to be doing well, and then all of a sudden, fourth game of his rookie season, he doesn't know what the future might hold. He doesn't know what his role is, and then quite frankly, his role has changed. And when dealing with that, each one of those that I was just speaking through, it can be a challenge. It can cause added stress. And the biggest thing that I picked out of just paying attention to SEC media days, the biggest thing that I picked out of it was the focus that, if we're looking maybe 10 years ago, people didn't speak as much about the idea that they were less than perfect, the idea that they struggled, that they had doubts, that they had insecurities, that in some ways we all battle with our own demons. And in some days that might be overwhelming, but because of the bigger focus on not only mental health, but also just overall what we go through every day on a psychological level, and the stress and pressures that we associate with, that we come into contact with, and how we interact with those, because there's been such a bigger presence of those in articles like this one I was talking about, in interviews from coaches, from athletes, there's been a shift in the culture. It's easier some days, but there's much more of a platform for open and honest dialogue. And quite frankly, it's become less taboo to be less than perfect, right? And so when we've got these pressures, this stress, right, that we're facing, instead of just focusing on all the things that we have so little control over, what we're seeing is that people are trying to, get in touch with the right professionals to be able to help them work through them. They're trying to find ways to approach the situation to be able to, when they're worried, rather than being overwhelmed, find a way to take a sense of control. When and just speaking about those three specifically, like the uncertainty of future, when through that Players Tribune article, Derrick was talking about, he started to figure out that while he was blessed with the platform in the NFL, that it wouldn't last forever. So what he did was he prepared for his future. He started studying and increased his ability to understand finances, and looked for more opportunities to network. So when faced with that uncertainty, he focused on what could he do about it? What could he do in spite of it, right? When we're talking about his the comparison piece of it, what he did was he realized, he could do it all. He could still be a devoted husband. He could still, be a businessman. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that he had to take away from the things that he loved, right? So when seeing what everyone else had, he realized that he could have what he needed in his own right. And rather than being afraid or being concerned about what he didn't have, he focused on what he did. And then when speaking about just the unpredictability of our role, instead, he realized he was an athlete, but that his identity was not found in that alone. He wasn't just an athlete, and he's really tried to use and is trying to use that platform not to grow himself, yes, but then to help other players realize that too. So it's insane, guys, and it's really exciting for someone who sits in it every day, that we are now seeing people feel more comfortable talking about where they struggle. And not just talking about where they struggle, but then also being open and honest about how they've worked through it, because they understand that now they aren't the only ones, because quite frankly, you aren't the only one. If you're struggling with anything, I can guarantee you there's someone else out there who is struggling with something very similar to what you are. So in speaking about this, yes, I'm talking directly to athletes, right? But I'm also talking to coaches, to athletic trainers, to athletic directors, to parents, anyone, to strength and conditioning coaches, anyone who interacts with people on a daily basis, right? But then also athletes. We play a role in creating an environment, right, that's going to be open and be willing to listen and be willing to say, these are normal things. And for those who we're working with athletes, honestly, help them manage their expectations. Help them realize that yes, we may be expecting it right here, but it's not always going to be there. And honestly, help them realize that their feelings are normal. And then if they build into a realm where it's gotten a little bit more challenging for them to deal with on a daily basis, help them find a professional who can help them in that way. It's also important to allow them to feel like they have a sense of control, right? We all like to have a sense of control. We'd like to feel empowered. Give them a role, give them a job, because by doing that, all of those things we just talked about, the uncertainty, the stress, by giving us a sense of control, by giving an athlete a sense of control and giving them a job, giving them a role, now we've empowered them to be able to feel as if they can take ownership of that. And really the last thing, which I think is honestly the most important, is it's important to build a trusting relationship. Yes, through showing that you're someone who's credible, that you have the right kind of training, absolutely. But then even more than that, by showing that you have a genuine investment, a genuine interest in them, right? So that then when we're struggling with certain things like this, they've got someone who they feel that they can talk to, someone who can maybe potentially guide them to the right person, to the right resource. But those things within themselves were at this point in time, I'm really excited about where athletics is headed. I think that we're sitting in a place where there's a much more open, honest dialogue that's being created. The culture has shifted, and that's so exciting because now we're focused less on these things, these concerns, these worries, these insecurities, these doubts being a problem, and more about them being a regular thing that every single person deals with, and how are we going to overcome them, right? So I want to thank you guys for hopping on today. Really exciting stuff. Honestly, I encourage you to check out all of the articles from SEC Media Days. There are some videos, some quotes of coaches and athletes talking about just this shift and the importance of a focus on mental health, a focus on understanding the adversity and the pressures that people are facing every day. And then I also encourage you to check out that Players Tribune article called "My New Purpose" by Derrick Morgan. It was absolutely incredible, and I'll put the link in the description of this video on YouTube so that you can check it out. But there's information out there more frequently than there has been in the past, because people feel as if they can talk about it, as if they're not going to be judged in that way. But the bottom line is everyone struggles. Everyone goes through something, and we have a lot more similarities in common than we do differences. So please feel free. Let me know what you thought about this video. We'll be putting it up on YouTube like usual. So please check it out. Let me know your thoughts. If you've got any suggestions for the future, I would absolutely love them. And I'll be on next week. Thanks so much, guys.